In a narrow street on the outskirts of Mexico City, where morning street calls blend with the dust and tangled fabric on a battered sewing table, Lina Morales lived each day with calloused hands and a heart torn in two. At 25, she was a skilled but unnoticed seamstress, sharing a rented room with her ailing mother, where every cough echoed a cruel reminder of time slipping away. Cancer had invaded Camila's fragile body, and the only viable treatment, a costly experimental therapy, remained an unreachable dream. Rent was overdue, prescriptions piled high, and each glance in the mirror revealed a young woman slowly drowning. Then, in the depths of despair, came an offer like a flicker of light at the end of a dark tunnel. Bear a child for a complete stranger, receive a life-changing sum of money, and disappear forever. No love, no ties. Just a cold agreement. A price to be paid to keep her mother alive. And so, the story began. The offer didn't come through a warm conversation, but in the form of a man in a gray suit, polished leather shoes, and a voice seemingly trained to avoid emotion. His name was Mr. Alvarez, a lawyer representing Damian Reyes, a powerful businessman known for his cold demeanor and obsessive privacy. Lina had only glimpsed his face once, on the cover of a finance magazine. Mr. Alvarez didn't waste words. My client desires an heir. Due to an irreversible medical condition he cannot conceive naturally. However, he has preserved genetic material from before. Lina's eyes froze. From the adjacent room, Camilla coughed violently. We selected you after thorough background checks, health records, and living conditions, he continued. You would undergo in vitro fertilization using Mr. Reyes' sperm and an anonymous, pre-screened donor egg. The terms followed. Lina would be relocated to a secure, private residence under 24/7 medical supervision, nutritionists, and care. All expenses covered. She would receive a generous monthly allowance until birth. After delivery, the child would be handed over to Mr. Reyes' team. Lina would sign away all parental rights and agree never to seek the child. No emotions, no attachments, just a transaction. On the table, he laid a thick envelope, an elaborate contract, and a check large enough to fund her mother's treatment, erase every debt, and start a new life. In that moment, every value Lina held, every dream, every piece of herself froze in place. And she knew, no one forced her. Desperation had already signed on her behalf. The villa where Lina was brought stood secluded by the sea, far from the world, quiet to the point of eeriness. The waves crashing on the rocks echoed like whispers from another realm. Everything was luxurious. The scent of soft oils, elegant decor, pristine surroundings, everything but the hollowness inside her. She was well cared for, a silent housekeeper named Helena, doctors who checked on her regularly, and a private chef who prepared every meal according to strict nutritional orders. No one spoke more than necessary. They treated her as part of a process, not a person, but an assignment. Her routine was clockwork: morning walks, midday ultrasounds, prenatal yoga in the afternoons, evenings confined to her room, no personal phone, no internet, only one weekly video call with her mother, closely monitored. In her 4th month, while reading by the window, Lina felt the first movement in her belly, gentle as a butterfly's flutter. Her hand flew to her stomach, her heart racing. No one was there, but she whispered, "Is that you?" From that moment, she began calling the baby Loose Light, a name she never spoke aloud to anyone, only murmurs in the night, after everyone had gone to sleep. "Hi, baby." "Luz, did you sleep well, Luz?" Though the contract said she must detach, must not form emotional bonds, Lina knew it was already too late. In that cold, silent mansion, a tiny flame had been lit. One only she and the child inside her could feel. The first cry echoed in the sterile white room of the private hospital. Lina, drenched in sweat and utterly exhausted, had never looked more alive. She had just endured the fiercest pain of her life, to welcome someone she didn't know she had been waiting for all along. "It's a healthy baby boy," the doctor announced. The cry continued, strong, unrelenting, filled with life. "Please, can I hold him? Just once," Lena whispered, her voice trembling. There was a brief hesitation. Then, against every protocol, the young nurse gently placed the baby in her arms. Lena wept. Luz was tiny and soft, his breath warm with the scent of new life. His eyes were shut, but his little hand wrapped tightly around Lena's finger. In that instant, every clause in the contract, every signature, every condition collapsed. "My baby," Lena sobbed. "I can't let you go." The door creaked open. Damien walked in. He wasn't supposed to be there. According to the agreement, he was to wait in another room, receive the child once all procedures were complete. But something pulled him here. A feeling, or maybe something more. He froze at the doorway. It wasn't the sight of Lena cradling the baby that shook him, but the raw, unstoppable force of her gaze. Not defiance, not fear, but a mother's primal bond. It shattered every wall he'd built. A look from the soul, undeniable. That look cut through every contract. Lena met his eyes, tears streaming. "I'm sorry. I can't give him away." The room fell into stillness. Nurses and doctors avoided eye contact. Lena braced for the worst, for him to call his lawyer, to end this story with the cold precision of business. But Damien said nothing. He slowly approached, his eyes fixed on the child. "Luz, isn't it?" he murmured. Lena nodded. "I've been calling him Love," Lena said softly. Damien raised an eyebrow. "Light?" She smiled faintly. "It's silly, I know. Just something I whispered to him every night." Damien looked at the baby, thoughtful. "His name is Mateo, but Luz, that's yours. A name only a mother can give." He sat beside her, looked down, not at a hair, but at a human being. "We need to talk," he said gently, his fingers brushing the baby's tiny hand. The storm had passed. After the emotional eruption in the delivery room, the following days flowed in a quiet, transformative calm. The contract was no longer hanging over them. There were no clauses, no obligations, no deadlines. Only the truth and a baby who needed love. Damien called his lawyer, not to sue Lena, but to cancel the contract in its entirety. "We'll raise the baby together," he told her, for the first time calling Mateo the baby, not the heir. I won't ask for anything," Lena whispered, still in disbelief. "I'm not doing this out of obligation," Damien said softly. "I'm doing it because I want to, because I need to learn to be a father, and I don't want to learn that alone." A few weeks later, Lena and baby Mateo moved into Damien's main residence, a warm home tucked in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Not long after, Camila joined them. Her cancer treatment complete, she had begun a slow but steady recovery. The once sterile, formal house began to change. Mateo's cries and giggles echoed through the halls. Camila made afternoon tea, tended to the garden, and sometimes coached Damien on how to hold the baby without startling him. Lena reopened her sewing kit, crafting soft blankets for Mateo, quietly rekindling her old passion. Damien still worked long hours, but every evening he came home on time. He changed diapers, learned how to make formula, sometimes played the piano to lull Mateo to sleep. Hands once used to signing contracts now cradled a fragile life, gently, patiently. A family had no clear definition, but that didn't matter anymore. Because in those midnight feedings, whispered bedtime stories, and drowsy shared naps, love began to blossom. No one dared label what they were. They spoke only in actions. "Let me hold him. I'll warm the milk. You rest, I'll rock him." Gradually, through unnamed gestures, something that looked and felt like family began to form. Damien Santiago once believed he could separate his heart from every decision, but from the moment baby Mateo let out his first cry in Lena's arms, he knew. he was no longer the same man. The days that followed weren't always easy, but they were never lonely. Lena was no longer the woman he had hired. She was the mother of his child. The first person to face him, not with defiance, but with fear, and courage hand in hand. Their house slowly became a home. Damien learned to change diapers, warm bottles, distinguish between Matteo's different cries. Fingers, once confident in signing million-dollar contracts, now fumbled with the buttons on the bottle warmer. He wasn't perfect, but he was patient, something Lena hadn't expected. As for Lena, after months of isolation, she began to rediscover herself. With Damien's quiet encouragement, she turned a spare room into a tiny sewing studio. Pastel fabrics, spools of thread, a humming sewing machine, each stitch drawing her closer to a dream she thought she had lost. By day, they took turns caring for Matteo. At night, Lena sang lullabies while Damien played soft melodies on the piano. Some evenings, after Matteo had fallen asleep, they'd sit together, not speaking much, but somehow, the silences became a thread connecting their once guarded souls. "Do you think I'm doing it right?" Damien asked one night, eyes still on the sleeping baby. "No one's born knowing how to be a father," Lena replied, "but Matteo needs someone willing to learn, and I think you're learning beautifully." They made no promises, but their presence, shared in life's smallest routines, became an unspoken vow. One afternoon, Lena invited Damien into her studio. "I want to start a little brand," she said, resting her hand on a half-finished toddler dress. "Nothing big, just mine." Damien looked at the colorful designs, his gaze softer than she'd ever seen. "I'll be your investor," he said, half-joking. "I don't need one," Lena smiled. "Just need you to believe in me." "I do." From trust, love began to bloom, not the impulsive, whirlwind kind, but one built through midnight feedings, bottle-warming debates, and shared smiles at Matteo's giggles. They had once been strangers, brought together by a cold, calculated contract, but now, step by step, they were learning how to be partners, in parenting and perhaps, someday, in life. Nearly a year after Matteo was born, Damien Santiago walked into his office, not to sign a new deal, but to dissolve the last one that had ever bound him to Lena. He rewrote the legal documents entirely. Matteo was now their son in every sense, by law, by love, by choice. No more party A and party B, just father, mother, and child. Damien never imagined he would do this, but then he never imagined he could love like this. On the opening day of Lena's boutique, Lou's Atelier, named after the secret nickname she once gave her unborn baby, Damien arrived with a small velvet box tucked into his jacket pocket. The store was bathed in soft natural light. Delicate dresses hung along oak racks, and in the center stood Lena, glowing with pride, the living heart of the dream she'd rebuilt with her own hands. After a heartfelt opening speech, Damien stepped onto the small platform and asked to say a few words. "Here are things money can't buy," he began, eyes fixed on her, "and sometimes the most precious gifts come from what we thought were our biggest mistakes." He then glanced at Matteo, who was in Camilla's arms below. "Son, I once thought I was choosing an heir, but life gave me a son and the woman brave enough to bring him into this world. Today, I'm not choosing duty, I'm choosing love, hers and yours." Then he knelt to Lena's stunned silence. "I rewrote every contract in my life," he said, "but this is the only promise I want to make without signatures. Lena Alvarez, you gave me a family before I even knew how much I needed one. You owe me nothing, but if you'll let me, I want to stand beside you, not because I must, but because I finally understand what it means to love." Tears streamed down Lena's cheeks. Camila clutched the hand of a fellow seamstress beside her, whispering something through a smile. Matteo beamed, unaware but somehow glowing with the joy around him. Lena nodded, Tears dropping onto the ring Damien slipped onto her finger that night they returned home, not as two people bound by circumstance, but as partners, by choice, by trust, by love. The seasons changed, and so did their lives. What began as a transaction had become something much more enduring, a family. And in the quiet rhythm of ordinary days, something extraordinary quietly bloomed. Soon after, they were married, quietly, warmly, no grand ceremony, just honesty. No binding contracts, save for Matteo's new birth certificate, now bearing both his parents' names. Lena looked back on her journey, once a frightened girl entering a clinic in despair, now a woman with her own store, her mother by her side, her child in her arms, and a husband who hadn't been fated, but chosen. A choice made of love with no conditions. Life had never been easy for Lena, but now she understood not all pain leads to parting. Some wounds do more than scar. They carve out space for love to take root. And the most beautiful love often grows not in ease, but in endurance, in silence, in the quiet courage to stay. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. The once quiet home now echoed with the laughter of children. Matteo, now 5, zipped through the backyard in a superhero cape stitched by his mother. His curly hair and bright eyes were Damien's mirror, but his heart, his gentle, curious heart, belonged fully to Lena. On the porch, Lena cradled their youngest baby, Alma, in her arms. She had just turned 1, with warm brown eyes and a smile so radiant Damien often joked that from the moment she was born, his heart no longer belonged to himself. Camila was now fully recovered. Her mornings were filled with tending the garden, afternoons spent teaching Matteo to read, and evenings telling fairy tales with Alma curled against her chest. The house that once felt too big now fit perfectly, alive, cozy, and wrapped in love. Damien, the man who once knew only contracts and deadlines, now devoted his evenings to his family. He had a small chair in Lena's sewing studio, where he played with Alma while Lena tested fabrics and sketched new patterns. And every time he saw her smile, he felt something extraordinary, love, growing, slowly, steadily, without demand or drama, but endlessly. "I used to think I needed an heir," he whispered one evening as they stood by the window, watching their 2 children sleep. "But what I truly needed was a family." Lena squeezed his hand and smiled. No words were needed. Her eyes said everything. Life wasn't perfect, but it was full. And in the warmth of morning breakfasts, in Alma's babbled "Papa," or when Matteo crawled into bed after a bad dream, Lena knew love wasn't a reward. It was a choice, made again every single day for the ones who matter most.